Good evening, folks. This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review Rick Ross's 2010 EP, the Albert Anastasia EP. Now, basically, this was a teaser until he dropped Teflon Don a couple months later, which I did review on my channel, so you can see that review. And I'm starting to review more Rick Ross, but I do remember this mixtape from back in the day. And this is kind of a little bit before singles started promoting mixtapes. It was right around this time with records like Dream Chasers, which came out a year later, and like Rick Ross's Rich Forever and those type projects. But I would have to say that there are some gems and bubblers on here quite a bit. And I was surprised, especially considering that this project is free. There's just no reason to not mess with this one. I feel like with Rick Ross was on a particular high back in 2010 because he was starting to do Rick Ross was starting to do songs like I'm Not a Star and MC Hammer and some of those type moments. Rick Ross particularly reached like he had further apexes, but this was like the start of him reaching an apex with Teflon Don and stuff that he was doing. But I wanted to wonder because it's been years. It's probably been like at least 10 years since I've listened to the Albert Anastasia EP, and I kind of thought, well, how did it stack up against Rick Ross's two or three best projects, which would be God Forgives I Don't, Rich Forever, and Teflon Don? Those were his prime years, but I kind of feel like this does have some of that element. It just doesn't have the drill rap. So I don't know what happened to Rick Ross between like the spring of 2010 and the summer of 2010 when he started getting into drill and like Lex Luger beats and that type stuff. But there's really not much of that on here. And I'm not complaining about it as if that's a bad thing, but it just feels like Rick Ross really went through like some epiphanies in 2010 because he does try some suave stuff. But this one, the difference between this project and his last album, Deeper Than Rap, before that, like Deeper Than Rap was kind of sophisticated, but this album really showcases like a true art form of sophistication. It just has like Rick Ross is not just in white tees or basketball jerseys, smoking that type of stuff. I mean, it's a little bit more with like a crisp kind of element towards it and a lot more sophistication and suaveness that I just did not feel like was. I mean, there were songs like Mafia music on like Deeper Than Rap, but this is kind of there's songs on here like Knife Fight, Sweet Life, and All I Need that really showcase like it's some sort of almost mafioso life that Biggie and Jay-Z used to incorporate. It's just interesting to kind of get that because for him to be a Southern rapper and kind of do that, there just weren't an overabundance of Southern rappers that kind of took that angle. So this is kind of it's an extra kind of situation to say that he's not just in the same spot that he was back in the hustling days when he was kind of like a drug dealer, pseudo cocaine dealer type stuff, and that relative context about how that kind of went. And it's interesting to kind of get like some of these new angles, just especially in like free music as far as the effectiveness of it kind of goes, because there are some really strong cuts for ladies on here. There's not quite any song like MC Hammer is on this album, but I feel like it's just better to purchase it on Teflon Don because it's a better version. There's a handful of songs that do show up on Teflon Don, but they're just better on that album. But there are some bubblers on here, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. This is going to be kind of a shorter, scanter review just because there's no singles and there's not much promotion. So, like I said, this was kind of before, a little bit before, like, mixtapes really had singles abundantly, but I don't even know if there were music videos for it. But the 6 songs out of 12 that I recommend to you would be, 6 out of 12 would be Gotti Family, Fire Hazard, All I Need with Birdman and Trey Songz, Sweet Life with John Legend, Knife Fight with Cool G Rap, and Nasty with Mass Pike Miles. Now, I'm going to go ahead and slash 3 of the other 12. Out of the 12 songs, I'm going to slash 3 of them because MC Hammer, Blowing Money Fast, and Super High are on Teflon Don. So there's really no point to just getting these songs for free. It's just they're the better version of those songs are on Teflon Don. So that really narrows it down to just 9 songs. And me liking 6 out of 9 is pretty damn effective. That's definitely an outstanding lineup to be able to say that. But I'm going to talk about the songs that I recommend to you first, then I'll talk about some of the ones I didn't enjoy as much. So basically the best song on this album, this real kind of carnival-esque party song that just has like a real exuberant and kind of infectious energy is Nasty. Rick Ross is barely on the song because of how excellent a job that Mass Pike Miles does. He just really tore that song apart. Rick Ross started to feel affiliated with him. Rick Ross started affiliating with him the year before, but he really had some pretty highlighted vocals. I mean, he sounded like he was like an A-list hook artist on this song, is the way he did it. It was like Usher, T-Pain, Neo kind of territory with that one. Great beat, also nice party carnival-esque beat, like I was saying. Sweet Life with John Legend is another great team up from Rick Ross and John Legend. They tend to do some good songs together, and this one's a very sophisticated one. Kind of just has like a more suit and tie kind of atmosphere, the sort of stuff that Jay-Z was doing on American Gangster. I really kind of feel like that emphasis is pretty. I tend to check for John Legend and Rick Ross collaborations, and this one's no different. I almost feel like this should have been on Teflon Don, but I'm glad it's free. It's definitely a suave one. Knife Fight is another suave one. This one's not for the ladies, but it does kind of have that same. This one kind of feels like Knife Fight feels like an East Coast song. Really kind of reminds me of like an East Coast kind of soulful type sound that you might hear from Ghostface Killer, folks like that, Raekwon, RZA, some of those type people. I do kind of feel like it's just got that nice kind of Dead Presidents from Jay-Z type feel towards it, and this nice, easy kind of smoke a cigar kind of song. All I Need really feels cinematic. It really feels like it's out of a movie, and it's just like a chapter of a movie unfolding, and you get like the dialogue going, and it just feels like success is just really becoming emphatic and that type of stuff, and it's just living the good life, that kind of vibe. Birdman does a great job on there. Trey Songz, I kind of felt like the beat overpowered Trey Songz' hook, but somehow he kind of slightly manages to keep up with it. But the beat is just great. Just the violins on that song really make it feel like you're watching like the movie Casino or one of those type movies like Goodfellas or something like that. I mean, Rick Ross really harnessed like some of these sophisticated type ones. I mean, you can tell by the album cover that he had sophistication in mind. But so basically, All I Need, Sweet Life, Knife Fight all have that sophistication, and even Gotti Family does, which is another one I'm going to talk about. That's another highlight. That one really feels like a sophisticated party song. I really feel like it's just a lot more like blue blood of a party song. It's interesting to kind of get that. Yo Gotti helped the song out. They both did well on there, and yeah, I mean, it just I can see it as like a backyard smoking kind of song, but it just has like a differential kind of dress to impress kind of night type feel where it could be played at a Friday night, but it's just not like your standard white tee and tall tee kind of club and that type of stuff. It just has like a little bit more stepping out kind of vibe towards it, which I like. But it's just that's kind of the concept. So those are all the ones I recommend, and then here's some of the ones I didn't like. White Sand Part 2, I feel like didn't really add much. It was just the same beat with new verses, and the beat was just kind of a little bit more monotonous than I would have wanted. I mean, I do like the White Sand beat, but just not across 5 minutes. They should have shortened their verses a little bit. Maybe made it like a 12-bar verse and made it like 4.5 minutes or 3 minutes 45 seconds or something. It's just too monotonous a beat to listen to for that length of time. And 300 Soldiers really didn't have that terrific a beat either. I think 300 Soldiers was trying to be more of like a gutter track, but it just didn't quite work out that well as I would have liked for it to have been that way. It was grimy, but just not grimy in like an emphasized kind of melodic kind of way that it probably needed to. And then Moneymaker kind of reminded me of Lil Wayne's from the Carter 2 Money on My Mind. It has a lot of similarities, just that kind of hustling and Money on My Mind kind of hook and chorus and that type of stuff. Very similar to like that kind of slow and, you know, drawn out kind of chorus that like Rick Ross did on Hustlin', but it just did a pretty weak job of trying to emphasize those type songs. Hustlin' and Money on My Mind by Lil Wayne, both the execution of that was just better. I feel like Rick Ross could probably do a better job, considering that he was the one that made the song Hustlin'. I know he can make those kind of slow drawl, kind of chopped and screwed hooks a lot better than what kind of came out on this project, but that one was just kind of underbaked. I just didn't really appreciate that one. So me liking 6 out of 12 songs on here, or 6 out of 9. I kind of want to score this differently because some of the songs that were on this album were also on Teflon Don. So it's not so much, they're not bad songs, the Teflon Don songs, but I just don't see the point when you can just get Teflon Don. So I feel like me liking 6 out of 9, I'm going to give this album like a 7.25 out of 10. I think that that's effective enough just to be able to say that 7.25 indicates it's really good. I mean, almost I would have given it like a 7.5 or higher, but I feel like, uh, you know, I do think maybe another song or two could have helped. I mean, I know there were a small couple of beats that probably could have stood to turn out better. Like Moneymaker and 300 Soldiers were trying to bring like the more riotous energy that Rick Ross would later become known for, but they didn't turn out that well. And like White Sand Part 2 was kind of monotonous. That's just kind of the concept there as far as that went. And I'm also going to talk about Fire Hazard because that was an example of a song, just to kind of bring it back to the review a little bit. Fire Hazard was kind of a song. Yeah, I just kind of felt like Rick Ross kind of struggled to do kind of like the Excite You numbers, the kind of boilers, and the kind of drill type songs that he would later do on like Teflon Don. I mean, he did do it with MC Hammer, but it seems like he was still trying to kind of flesh that out. I mean, Fire Hazard just felt like kind of like a spare cut from Trilla or Deeper Than Rap. It seemed like it still needed to be fleshed out. It's a good song and I'll take it, but it's weaker compared to the sophisticated and lady songs that he did. I feel like this time around Rick Ross had better songs for the ladies, better songs for sophistication and like elegant stepping out, but it just didn't have it in terms of like the gutter cuts and that type of stuff. Like Moneymaker, Fire Hazard, 300 Soldiers all are weaker compared to the songs like Sweet Life, All I Need, Nasty, and Knife Fight. And that's just kind of the thing. But yeah, so to talk about that, 7.25 out of 10. The social score I will give like a 6 out of 10 just because it didn't have any singles and it doesn't really have like an exuberantly like you need to hear this song on here. There's some good stuff, but I don't know how many people know who Mass Pike Miles is. I think that's probably the best. I think the best choice of a song on here is the Mass Pike Miles song Nasty, but I just would have to kind of say like Sweet Life is a good one, but the situation about it is if you're not up on like the sophistication and you don't really want something suave or you want something a little bit more rowdy and party and do something to smoke to and that type of stuff, it doesn't really have that. I mean, a lot of this is glossy and elegant and kind of eloquent and that type of stuff, and it's just kind of, I would have to say it's there, but it's a different kind of suave on this. So that's kind of the thing. It's not like Rick Ross was on Trilla and Port of Miami and stuff. That's kind of the thing. He does do it, but it's not as emphasized and quite as emphatically good. So 6 out of 10 social. Can this record be topped? In ways, but this is pretty solid to kind of get, and I definitely appreciate having it. And in terms of the future, like Rick Ross dropped an album in December of 2021, just last year, and he'll probably drop something probably pretty soon. We'll have to see what happens with it. But for what it is, there is some gems here, and I'm going to start reviewing more Rick Ross and stuff like that. So